At just 35 years old, Daniel and Rebecca walked away from their jobs. Not because they won the lottery, not because they inherited a fortune, but because they built something most people only dream of: financial freedom. While their friends were still stuck in 9 to 5 jobs, praying for promotions, and drowning in bills, this couple was already retired, traveling the world, and living life on their own terms. The shocking part? They didn't earn six-figure salaries. They weren't born into wealth. Their secret was something so simple, yet so powerful, that almost anyone could use it. Daniel worked as an IT support technician. Rebecca was a middle school teacher. Together, their combined income was modest, barely above the national average. They lived in a small, 2-bedroom apartment. Their car was secondhand. Vacations were rare, usually road trips to nearby towns. To anyone looking from the outside, they seemed like any other hard-working couple, destined for decades of work, hoping one day to retire in their 60s. But what nobody realized was that Daniel and Rebecca were quietly building something extraordinary. Every late-night conversation over takeout, every Saturday morning when they sat down with coffee and spreadsheets, they were asking themselves a question most people avoid. What if we didn't have to wait until 65? What if we could buy back our time sooner? That question didn't just linger, it grew into a mission. And the path they took to achieve it was nothing like what their friends or family expected. Daniel's mornings started before sunrise. He'd sit in traffic for nearly an hour, sipping lukewarm coffee from a travel mug, bracing himself for another day of troubleshooting endless IT issues. His paycheck barely kept up with rising rent. Rebecca's days weren't much better. She juggled classes of restless teenagers, grading late into the night, often falling asleep at her desk with red pen in hand. Her salary? Respectable on paper, but crushed under student loans and medical bills. Every month felt like the same exhausting cycle. Rent consumed nearly half their income. Loan payments swallowed another chunk. Whatever was left barely covered groceries, gas, and the occasional small treat. Vacations? Out of the question. Even small luxuries like going out for dinner brought guilt. Rebecca remembered one night vividly. She bought a $4 latte on her way to work and spent the rest of the morning feeling guilty for wasting money. They watched friends upgrade to bigger homes and newer cars. Social media made it worse. Photos of beach vacations, new kitchens, and fancy brunches filled their feeds. Meanwhile, Daniel and Rebecca argued quietly over whether they could afford to replace their aging couch. There were nights they sat together in silence, staring at spreadsheets and wondering, are we really going to live like this for the next 30 years? Work, bills, stress, until we're old and too tired to enjoy life. That fear, the fear of being trapped in the grind forever, became the weight that pushed them to search for another way. And then, one small moment, almost accidental, cracked open the possibility of something they never dared imagine. It happened one ordinary Saturday morning. Daniel and Rebecca sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of bills and an old laptop. Coffee cups steamed beside them, and the spreadsheet on the screen told the same depressing story. Work harder, save little, and retire at 65, if they were lucky. Rebecca sighed. There has to be another way, she whispered. On a whim, Daniel typed into Google, how to retire early. He expected nothing serious, maybe a gimmick or some get-rich-quick nonsense. But instead, he stumbled into something neither of them had heard of before, a movement called FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early. As they scrolled through blogs and forums, they read story after story of ordinary people, nurses, teachers, even janitors, who had managed to retire in their 30s and 40s. Not by winning the lottery, not by earning millions, but by rethinking how they lived and how they used their money. The ideas sounded radical at first, living far below your means, saving 50 to 70% of your income, investing aggressively in low-cost index funds, building a lifestyle where freedom mattered more than luxury. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, stunned. Is this possible for us? Daniel's eyes lit up. What if it is? That night, they talked for hours. For the first time in years, they weren't complaining about bills or stressing over money. They were dreaming, dreaming of a life without alarm clocks, without bosses, without waiting until 65 to finally breathe. The decision wasn't easy. Following the fire path would mean sacrifice. It would mean saying no when everyone else said yes. It would mean becoming the weird ones in their circle. But deep down, they knew if others could do it, so could they. And so, Daniel and Rebecca made a choice, one that would change the rest of their lives. What started as a simple Google search became the spark that would lead them out of the grind and into freedom by 35. At first, their changes looked small, almost invisible. Rebecca canceled her daily $4 latte habit and brewed coffee at home. Daniel biked to work twice a week, saving on gas. They sold the second car they barely used. Their friends rolled their eyes. "You only live once," one said as Rebecca packed homemade lunches while everyone else ordered takeout. But while their friends spent, Daniel and Rebecca were quietly stacking savings. They cut their spending in half, living on just 40% of their income and saving the rest. Every dollar they saved was invested, not stashed under a mattress. They funneled it into low-cost index funds and watched their money begin to grow on its own. The first year, their net worth barely budged. The second year, it doubled. By the third year, something magical happened. Their money started making more money than their day jobs. Every small sacrifice turned into a seed, and those seeds were multiplying. One night, Daniel logged into their investment account. The number staring back at him was larger than he had ever seen in his life. He called Rebecca over, his voice trembling. This is working," he whispered. They didn't stop there. Instead of upgrading their apartment when raises came, they stayed put. Instead of vacations abroad, they explored local trails and parks. But here's the twist. They didn't feel deprived. They felt empowered. Every time they said no to something now, they were saying yes to freedom later. Rebecca kept a sticky note on their fridge that read, "Do we want this, or do we want freedom?" That single question guided every decision. Then came the moment their investments hit 6 figures. 6 zeros. It was no longer a dream. It was real. Daniel looked at Rebecca. "We're not crazy. We're actually doing this." By their early 30s, their savings rate was so high that friends couldn't believe it. They invested bonuses, tax refunds, even side hustle income. And every year, their projected retirement age dropped lower and lower. From 65 to 55 to 45, until one day the math told them something wild. If they stayed on track, they could retire in just a few more years. The countdown had begun. They circled a date on the calendar, the day they would walk away forever. But as that date drew closer, one burning question lingered. Would they actually be brave enough to do it? The day finally came. Daniel handed in his resignation at the IT office where he had spent more than a decade fixing other people's problems. Rebecca hugged her students goodbye, tears in her eyes, knowing she was walking away not because she was tired of teaching, but because she had earned her freedom. They were 35 years old, and they were retired. No alarm clocks, no rush hour traffic, no bosses marking their calendars with meetings that drained their souls. Instead, their days began with quiet morning walks, coffee together on the balcony, and the thrilling question, what do we want to do today? They traveled, not luxury resorts or 5-star hotels, but experiences that filled their hearts. Backpacking through Europe, hiking in national parks, visiting family without worrying about vacation days. Even more powerful than the travel was the peace. For the first time in their adult lives, money wasn't the chain around their ankles. It was the key to their freedom. Friends who once mocked their frugal choices now looked at them with awe. "How did you do it?" they asked. Daniel and Rebecca would just smile and say, "We stopped waiting for the lottery. We built our freedom ourselves." Daniel and Rebecca's journey wasn't magic. It wasn't luck, and it certainly wasn't a lottery ticket. It was built on choices, small ones repeated consistently over time. Here are the key lessons their story teaches us all. Save more than people think is normal. Most people save 5 to 10% of their income. Daniel and Rebecca flipped that, saving over 50%. It felt extreme at first, but it bought them decades of freedom. Invest, don't just save. Parking money in a regular savings account would have kept them stuck forever. Instead, They invested in simple, low-cost index funds that grew quietly year after year. Prioritized freedom over lifestyle inflation. Every raise, every bonus, every extra paycheck, they didn't spend it on cars or clothes. They funneled it into their future. They asked, do we want this now? Or do we want freedom later? Your income doesn't matter as much as your habits. They didn't have six-figure jobs. What set them apart was discipline, patience, and vision. The truth is simple. Financial independence isn't reserved for the rich. It's available to anyone who dares to live differently, think long-term, and act with intention. Daniel and Rebecca proved something most people don't want to believe. You don't need a miracle to retire early. You don't need to be born rich. You don't need a lottery ticket. What you need is a plan, discipline, and the courage to choose freedom over fitting in. If an IT tech and a school teacher could build a life of independence by 35, what's stopping you from starting your journey today? Don't let another year slip away waiting for things to get better. Freedom doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice. And if their story inspired you, wait until you watch how a teacher goes from broke to millionaire investor without anyone knowing. Click here to watch that story next, because once you see how she did it, you'll never look at money the same way again.